Joining us now, Margaret Hoover, the great-granddaughter of President Herbert Hoover, and author of the new book, American Individualism, How a New Generation of Conservatives Can Save the Republican Party. Well, that is, if you think it needs to be saved.
Well, and of course, we all know it does, but so Margaret, your great-grandfather called, and he wants his book title back.
Hey, thank you for mentioning that.
I stole Herbert Hoover's book title.
It was a reference to Herbert Hoover because so many people these days only talk about the Great Depression. And this he wrote in 1922. He was writing it returning from Europe after having fed 8 billion Belgians before he was organizing food relief to save 10 million Russians. This is a man who in his day was called the great humanitarian, master of emergencies, pioneered the nonprofit organization. He's constantly discredited with the Great Depression, and so it was a reference to him and a guiding principle that I suggest the Republican Party really ought to look at as a template to connect to the next generation.
So what you're saying is
they need to be saved.
For the Republican Party to be saved, they need to embrace Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover was
Put that on a bumper sticker.
Let's be honest. The book is about connecting to the next generation.
Right.
And if you look at all the numbers, what we all know is that the 30 and under demographic helped elect Barack Obama. They were the majority of the difference in his election. They voted 2-1 for him, 66% to 32%. Right. They are the largest generation in American history, 80 million strong. Half of them turned out at the last election. They were 18% of the electorate.
So Ronald Reagan did very well with young voters. Republicans haven't done very well with young voters since. So what do Republicans need to do?
Well, what I suggest, and this is the Herbert Hoover connection, what I try to do in my book is characterize who the millennials are, what makes them tick. They are a generation that is pragmatic, not partisan. They believe that government can work. They are the least traditional generation in American history. They are the most diverse generation. They are 40% non-white. They are the only generation where a majority believe in same-sex marriage, couldn't care less about sexual
This isn't really stacking up really well for the Republican Party in 2011 right now.
I think if here's what we need to do for 2012.
Where's your punchline?
2012. For 2012, here's the thing. The conservative coalition, of course, is known for always infighting, right? But like Reagan was able to focus our sights on something so that all of the conservative movement could unite around. And really, the unifying theme during Reagan's administration was defeating communism.
Right.
If we look at this fiscal crisis, it is nothing more than generational theft. And I think we can connect to the next generation by talking about fiscal issues and jobs and the economy and spending and entitlement reform, issues that directly affect the next generation and that can also unite the coalition. Because the reality is, actually, social issues, there's no reason for them to break up the Republican Party.
Yeah.
If we are the party of individual liberty and the party of individual freedom, we ought to be entirely consistent on this. And I write a lot about this in my book.
John, you go all across the country reporting on presidential campaigns, writing books, making billions of dollars. You've got to see what I see just when I go out and give speeches. It's almost like if you're under 30 and you hear, let's say, John Boehner saying who the Republicans worried about his next election, or Barack Obama saying those irresponsible Republicans, you just see a collective eye roll from people 30 and younger, 35 and younger. They are, they are just seem to be less partisan than most others.
Not just less partisan, but I think just so deeply skeptical of the whole process. There was obviously a big movement towards Barack Obama in 2008, where a lot of young voters were really attracted to him. I think the president and his people realized they're going to have a hard time inspiring that kind of enthusiasm again, because the last 2.5 years has been not what a lot of young people who voted for the president thought they were going to get.
Hasn't been open change.
They thought there was going to be, a breaking of what they hate about politics, and what had the last 2.5 years, whoever's fault it was, it just looks like same old. And so that eye roll you're talking about is, man, okay. We elected a transformational leader, and again, whoever's fault it was, we're in the same place we were 3 or 4 years ago.
Or worse.
Yeah. Well, and what you raise is they bought in, I think Barack Obama, oftentimes youth react to the failures they know in their government. So Ronald Reagan, sure, he articulated a great vision, but they were also reacting to the youth, or to the failures of the Carter administration. I think in the same way, Republicans really lost youth during the Bush years. I think they're rejecting the failures of the Bush years, rejecting Republican brand damage, and buying into what Barack Obama really encapsulated, which is the ethos of the generation. They want a government that can work. They want to deliver post-partisanship. And that's what they bought into, and there are clear signs they've been disappointed. They didn't turn out in 2010 nearly in the numbers that were expected or in the previous off-year election cycle. And also his approval rating has dropped 18% amongst this group.
But so taking all that, what have the Republicans done to create exactly what you just talked about? A pragmatic government can be effective, government can work, we're not going to be ideologues, we're going to be... I don't quite see that in the
Margaret,
Republican Party at the moment.
it's okay for you to say nothing.
Well, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to say nothing, but I'm not going to say everything either. and I'm going to try to give you a pragmatic answer, which would appeal to millennials. I think there are few members within the Republican Party who actually do a great job of not demonizing the president, laying out pragmatic policy alternatives.
Like who?
I think Paul Ryan is very, very good on this. I think Chris Christie is very good on this. There are a few key members, and I think that's the tone you've got to take. I also believe that when you're in the minority, you don't have the bully pulpit of the presidency. You just have less ability to communicate broadly to the next generation.
Right.
But I think that'll happen as we heat up for 2012.
It is staggering looking at Jimmy Carter 79 and 80 and Ronald Reagan 81 and 82. How that clean break, even though the left was offended by many things that Ronald Reagan did, young voters, and I was 18 in 1980, and God, everybody, when I went to college, and all of my young friends said, okay, wait, this is pretty easy. And it was non-ideological. You had the indecision of Jimmy Carter and the hostage crisis versus Ronald Reagan. There hasn't been that clean break, obviously, but I think a lot of people thought that's what we were going to get with Barack Obama. And it just, again, for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out that way.
Margaret, the book is American Individualism, How a New Generation of Conservatives Can Save the Republican Party.
Let me ask you one more question.
Can they do it? I don't know.
See, John, is he a Republican?
John Avalon is an independent, sir. He is not a Republican.
He gets very angry.
Are you sure?
I am positive.
All right.
All right. Well, say hello to John for us.